Mara packed one bag. She did not fight when the elders came to her door. She had learned, a long time ago, that fighting cost things she could not afford to lose, so she folded her 2 good sweaters, wrapped the bread she had baked that morning in a cloth, and placed a photograph face down at the bottom of the bag without looking at it. The elder who came for her was a man named Drevin. He was old and nervous, and he kept clearing his throat as if he had something important to say. He never said it. He just stood in her doorway with his hands behind his back while she locked up the small apartment above the bakery, and then he walked her to a black car that smelled of leather and cold air. She got in herself. That was the part that made him uncomfortable. He had expected tears. He had expected her to ask questions. Instead, she sat in the back seat with her bag on her lap and watched the town disappear through the window, and the only thing she said for the first 2 hours was, "Is there water in the car?" There was. She drank it slowly and said nothing else. The castle appeared at dusk. It rose out of the pine trees like something that had always been there, like the trees had grown around it, out of respect. It was made of dark gray stone and tall, narrow windows, and it was so large that Mara had to tilt her head back to find the top of it. She did not say that it was beautiful. It was, but she was too busy counting the exits. 3 gates she could see from the car, 2 towers with guards, 1 road in. She memorized all of it. Inside, the castle smelled of pine and candle smoke, and something older beneath that, something warm and animal, and very controlled. The floors were stone. The ceilings were high. A woman with a sharp face and a clipboard met them at the entrance, and spoke to Drevin in a low voice about schedules and rooms, and what Mara was and was not permitted to do. Mara listened to all of it, without appearing to listen. She was given a room on the 3rd floor. It was larger than her entire apartment. The bed had 4 posts and white linen, and a window that looked out over a courtyard full of bare winter trees. She sat on the edge of the bed and did not unpack. She just sat there in her coat with her bag between her feet, and after a while she took out the bread from that morning and ate half of it slowly, and that was dinner. She did not know that 3 floors above her, something had changed. Kalen Voss had been the Alpha King for 11 years. He had taken the title at 22, in the way that titles like that were taken, not by asking for them, but by being the only one left standing who was capable of holding them. He ruled 6 packs across 3 territories. He made decisions that affected thousands of lives, and he made them cleanly, without hesitation, the way a man does when he has stopped expecting the decisions to be easy. He had a wolf named Sable. Or he'd had one. For 3 years, Sable had been silent. Not gone. Kalen could still feel him the way you feel a bad knee in cold weather. A persistent, dull awareness. But silent. No restlessness. No communication. No animal presence pressing up through him the way it had when he was young, and the wolf was new, and everything was loud. He had told no one. That evening he was at his desk reviewing border agreements when it happened. A sensation in his chest, sudden and sharp, like a door being opened in a house he thought was empty. He went very still. He pressed one hand flat against his sternum, and waited. Sable was not silent anymore. The wolf pushed forward with such force that Kalen had to grip the edge of the desk to stay seated. Not in aggression, not in warning. In something that had no clean name. A recognition so complete it felt like remembering something he had never known. He could not explain it. He could not explain why his head turned toward the east wing of the castle, or why he was already standing, or why his feet were moving before he had decided to move them. He went to the window. 3 floors down, a courtyard, bare trees, cold light. Nothing. He stood there for a long time. The formal meeting happened the next morning in the Great Hall. Mara was brought in by the sharp-faced woman, whose name turned out to be Lena. The hall was long and full of gray morning light, and Kalen was standing at the far end of it with 2 of his senior advisors, and a look on his face that Mara recognized. The look of a man who has been told this is a formality, and is deciding whether to believe it. She looked at the floor. Not from submission. She was not a woman who submitted easily. She looked at the floor because she had found, over the years, that when powerful people expected you to look at them and you didn't, it made them unsettled in a useful way. She counted the stones between her feet and waited. Mara. She looked up. He had said her name. She did not know how he knew it. She had not been introduced. Lena was still 2 steps behind her with the clipboard. Drevin was not in the room. There was no one who could have told him, and yet her name had come out of his mouth with no hesitation, no question mark at the end, as if he had simply known it the way you know the word for something you see every day. The hall was very quiet. One of the advisors looked at Kaylin. Galen was not looking at his advisor. Mara said, "Yes." "Are you well?" he asked. "From the journey." "I'm fine," she said. "Thank you." It was a short meeting. He asked standard questions about her comfort and her room, and whether she needed anything. She answered briefly and honestly. At no point did either of them mention what he had just done, said her name, unprompted, before she had spoken a word. She thought about it all the way back to her room. He thought about it for the rest of the day. She stayed because she had nowhere better to go. That was the honest answer, the one she turned over in her mind during the first week while she learned the castle's rhythms. When the kitchens opened, when the guards changed, which corridors had foot traffic at night, and which did not. She learned the castle the way she had learned every difficult place she had ever lived in, quietly, thoroughly, without announcing that she was learning it. She was given no formal role. She was told she was a guest, which was a polite word for something that didn't have a politer name. She spent her mornings in the library because it had good light. She spent her afternoons in the kitchen because the woman who ran it, a wide-shouldered woman named Bess, did not ask her questions and let her bake bread when she wanted to. She wanted to, often. Baking was the thing that had always made difficult situations feel manageable. There was something about the precision of it, the weight of flour, the temperature of water, the exact amount of time, that made her feel that things could be controlled, even when they couldn't. The Kaylin passed the kitchen doorway 3 times in 1 week. He never came in. He would pause, just briefly, and then continue on. The 3rd time, Mara looked up from the dough she was folding, and their eyes met for approximately 2 seconds before he moved on. Bess pretended not to notice. Mara pretended not to notice Bess pretending not to notice. He pulled her file the same night. What he found was clean, which bothered him, because nothing was ever that clean. She had been born in a small Eastern pack. Omega bloodline on both sides. Her parents had died when she was 12. Fever, the record said, which could mean anything. After that, she had moved between 3 different pack households until the age of 19, when she had simply left and not come back. No violation, no ceremony. She had just gone. There was no record of her having a wolf. He read that line twice. Then he put the file down and sat in the dark for a while. Sable, who had been restless for 6 days, pressed against his ribs. He found the photograph by accident. It was protocol. New arrivals' belongings were cataloged by security, not searched, just noted. Someone on his staff had listed the items in her bag and included it at the bottom. One photograph, subject unknown, kept face down. He had them bring it to him. He turned it over. A woman. She looked like Mara. Same shape to the jaw, same mouth, same quality of stillness in the eyes, though the woman in the photograph was older, and the photograph itself was old. 4 years, according to the date written on the back in small, careful handwriting. There was no name, just the date, and below it, 2 words in the same careful hand. "I'm sorry." He put the photograph down. He called Drevin at 2 in the morning and asked him, with a quietness in his voice that his staff had learned to treat carefully, why this girl? Not what she was, not her rank. Why her, specifically? Why his castle? Drevin stammered. He talked about omegas and peace offerings and the tradition of... Kaylin said, "Stop." Drevin stammered. "You don't know," Kaylin said. "My king, You don't know what you sent me." He ended the call. He sat with the photograph for a long time. He did not turn it face down. She tried to leave on a Thursday. She had been at the castle for 16 days. She woke before dawn, dressed in the dark, packed her bag the same way she had packed it at her apartment. Bread from the night before wrapped in cloth. The photograph returned to the bottom, face down. She was calm. She had a plan. The eastern gate had the lightest guard rotation between 4 and 5 in the morning. She walked through the castle without hurrying. She had learned which floorboards announced themselves. She moved through the gray pre-dawn like a woman who belonged exactly where she was, which was the other thing she had learned over the years, that confidence was sometimes the same as invisibility. She reached the eastern gate. Kalen was already there. He was standing in the arch of it, with his arms at his sides, and he was not blocking the gate, which was the thing she noticed first. He could have blocked it. There was room for one person, and he was a large man, and it would have required nothing from him. He was simply standing there. "You can go," he said. She stopped. She had prepared for commands. She had prepared for guards. She had prepared for the careful, reasonable explanation of why she was required to stay. She had not prepared for two quiet words spoken without anger and without negotiation, offered like something that genuinely cost him. She stood in the gray morning and did not move. The cold came in around them. Somewhere in the pine trees beyond the gate, a bird started. It stopped. The light began, slowly, to change. "Why are you here?" she asked. Not hostile, actually asking. "I don't know," he said. She believed him. That was the problem with the truth. You could usually feel it. They stood in the gate for a long time. Neither of them left. She stayed. The days changed after that in a way she did not have words for. Nothing was announced. Nothing was decided out loud. She still baked bread. He still passed the kitchen doorway. But now sometimes he stopped. And once he came in and sat on the stool near the window and read through papers while she worked. And they said very little to each other, and that was fine. Sable was constant now, a warm pressure in Kalen's chest, attentive and settled, like an animal that has finally reached the place it was trying to reach, and is simply resting there. 3 weeks in, he asked her about her wolf. They were in the library. She was by the window with a book she wasn't reading, and he was across the room, pretending to review a document. He asked it the way you ask a thing you have been not asking for a long time. "What is your wolf's name?" he said. She went still, not tense, still, the way water goes still. "I don't have a wolf," she said. "Then what have I been talking to for 3 weeks?" She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them looked away. "I was told I didn't have one," she said, finally. Her voice was even. "When I was young, the elders tested me, and they said the wolf wasn't there." "They were wrong," he said. "You can't know that." "Mara." He said her name the same way he had said it in the great hall, without question, without effort. "I know." She looked back at the window. Outside, the winter trees in the courtyard were starting to show the first early suggestion of buds, small and tightly closed. It had been cold for a long time. The cold was starting to loosen. She felt something in her chest she didn't have a name for, a warmth, small and careful, that had been there since the day she crossed the threshold, and had been growing so gradually, she had almost convinced herself it wasn't there at all. She thought about the photograph at the bottom of her bag. "I'm sorry." She thought about the morning she had baked bread for a day she didn't expect to see. She thought about all the places she had learned to leave. She thought about the eastern gate, and the gray morning, and the man who had stood in the arch of it without blocking anything. "I've never stayed anywhere," she said. "I know," he said. "I don't know how to do it." "Neither do I." He looked at the document in his hands that he wasn't reading. "I've been here 11 years, and I don't know how to stay either. I only know how to hold things." That was the most honest thing she had ever heard a person say. Outside, the cold kept loosening. The buds on the trees stayed closed for now, the way some things do. Not ready yet, but no longer sealed against the possibility of opening. She did not pick up her bag that night. She did not pick it up the next morning either. The photograph stayed where it was. There would be a time for it. There would be a time for all the things that didn't have answers yet. The woman in the photograph, the elders who had told her she was incomplete, the wolf she had been carrying without knowing it, quiet inside her all these years, waiting for the right threshold to cross. For now, there was the library and the good winter light. For now, there was bread, and someone sitting across the room, and the particular silence of two people who have both learned to be alone and are, very slowly, unlearning it. That was enough. That was, for the first time in a long time, exactly enough.